Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's dive right in. When we hear the name Abraham Lincoln, our minds usually jump straight to the 16th president of the United States, right? We picture the towering leader who steered a divided nation through the Civil War and abolished slavery. But before he ever set foot in the White House, he was just a guy who had to conquer some truly impossible odds. So today, we're unpacking a profoundly heroic journey, showing how a boy from a dirt floor cabin fundamentally changed the world. To really get into the right headspace for this, there's a powerful quote from our source material that translates to, "If you don't give up, efforts don't go to waste. Those who try never lose." And man, when you look at Lincoln's life, the contrast is just staggering. We are talking about a man whose family was so desperately poor they were constantly displaced, wandering just to find a place to sleep. He couldn't even afford basic schooling. Yet, he went on to destroy the institution of slavery on a global scale. So how does someone bridge that massive gap? How does a boy with absolutely nothing end up achieving everything? Section 1. Humble and harsh beginnings.
Born in 1809 in a tiny log cabin in Kentucky, Lincoln's early life was completely defined by extreme poverty and constant displacement. Because of fierce land disputes, his family was forced out of their home when he was just a toddler. They moved, started farming again, and boom, another land dispute forces them out. By 1816, they were pushed all the way to the dense, unforgiving forests of Indiana. And this part of his youth is full of incredible emotional whiplash. On one hand, you have his biological father, Thomas Lincoln. Thomas was a harsh guy. He actually opposed education, pulled Abraham out of school at age 6, and forced him into grueling manual labor, totally dismissing the boy's deep desire to read. But then, on the other hand, stepping into his life later on was his stepmother, Sarah Bush Johnston. She provided boundless love, treating him even better than her own biological kids, and she fiercely supported his passion for reading.
But before Sarah came into the picture, young Abraham faced a tragedy that would scar him forever. 9. That is how old he was when his biological mother, Nancy, passed away. Imagine that for a second. You're 9 years old, living in deep poverty in the middle of a dense forest, and suddenly you lose your mom. The entire burden of the household fell right onto the shoulders of his 11-year-old sister, Sarah. It was a devastating emotional blow that honestly could have broken his spirit permanently. Fortunately, about a year later, his father married Sarah Bush Johnston, and she completely filled that agonizing void. She saw the spark in Abraham, and she nurtured it. In fact, much later in life, after he'd reached the highest office in the land, Lincoln gave her all the credit. He famously said, "I owe everything to my angel mother." It's just a beautiful reminder of how one supportive person can completely rewrite the trajectory of your life. Section 2. The hunger for knowledge. Despite his father's cruelty and literally having no formal schooling, Lincoln's appetite for reading was totally voracious. He would borrow books from anyone he could find, absorbing every single word whenever he had a spare second away from the fields. His mind was expanding way beyond the walls of his wooden cabin. But, survival still had to come first. Before he ever thought about politics, think about this relentless grind. To feed himself, he worked as a farm laborer. He used carpentry skills to literally build his own boat and haul cargo. He worked as a store clerk. He even became a local postmaster, which was huge because it finally allowed him to meet people and earn their respect. He was doing whatever it took just to stay afloat. So here's the really crucial question. How does a poor laborer who spends his days chopping wood and hauling cargo become a lawyer without ever attending a single day of college? I want you to really think about that. No money, no university, no internet. How do you teach yourself the law? Well, you do it through sheer, unbelievable willpower. Our source material shares this wild anecdote. Lincoln hears about a retired judge across the river who has a massive collection of law books. Now, it is the dead of winter, freezing, harsh cold. Lincoln takes his boat out onto the icy river, but the boat crashes into the ice and completely shatters. Does he turn back? No way. He literally swims across the freezing water, shows up at the judge's door, and begs to read those books. The judge agrees, but on one condition. Lincoln has to work for him. So Lincoln joyfully chops wood, fetches water, and cleans the house, all just for the privilege of reading those law books. Section 3. First steps into politics and deep tragedy. Armed with his self-taught education, Lincoln took his very first steps into politics because he wanted to fight the cruelty of slavery. But he suffered a crushing initial defeat. And to make matters worse, he had quit his postmaster job to run, which plunged him right back into severe poverty. Actually, scratch that, the political defeat was nothing compared to the heartbreak that was waiting for him. At age 24,
Lincoln fell deeply in love with a woman named Anne Rutledge. Tragically, she contracted a severe illness and died shortly after. This just completely derailed his life. Lincoln plunged into a dark, profound depression. He would sit by her grave, weeping for hours on end. He was so broken, so completely devoid of hope, that his friends literally had to hide knives from him, terrified he might take his own life.
Yet somehow he didn't give up. Rescued from the brink by his good friend Bowling Green, who slowly pulled him out of that terrible depression, Lincoln found his footing again. He returned to politics, ran for the legislature a second time, and won. He quickly became this powerful, outspoken voice, really drawing the youth to his cause. He even successfully championed the campaign to make Springfield the new capital. The comeback had officially begun. Section 4. The Honest Lawyer. So Lincoln finally gets his law license and finds genuine mental peace, practicing law for about 20 years. But what history really remembers is his strict moral code. He flat out refused to fight false cases and routinely refused to take fees from the poor. This actually led his first partner, Stuart, to abandon him because Stuart viewed him as a financial failure. But take this incredible story, for example. Lincoln and a new colleague took on a case for a mentally ill woman whose land had been seized by a local thug. Lincoln was so sharp, so unbelievably effective in the courtroom that it took him exactly 15 minutes to win the case and get her land back. But here's the kicker. After that 15-minute victory, Lincoln's partner happily collected the full legal fee from the woman's brother. When he told Lincoln the good news, Lincoln was furious. He demanded his partner return his half of the money immediately. He stated flatly that he would rather starve to death than take money from a helpless, sick woman. This wasn't just some crafted political persona. This was a man of absolute, unbreakable moral character. And he absolutely needed that unbreakable character because his personal life continued to be an absolute battlefield of grief. In 1842, he married Mary, and they had 4 sons together. But heartbreakingly, 3 of those young boys died in childhood. Only one, Robert, survived. The amount of sorrow Lincoln carried with him on a daily basis is just unimaginable to most of us. Yet instead of breaking him, this relentless personal heartbreak only hardened his resolve to heal a broken nation. Section 5. Winning the White House. All of it, the extreme poverty, the freezing rivers, the lost elections, and the profound personal tragedies, it was all leading to this breathtaking timeline. In 1860, the man born in a dirt floor cabin became the 16th president of the United States. He immediately faced the greatest crisis in the nation's history. From 1861 to 1865, he guided America through the brutal Civil War, keeping the nation from fracturing forever. And most importantly, he achieved his lifelong dream, abolishing the horrific practice of slavery through constitutional amendment. Sadly, his heroic journey ended abruptly when he was assassinated on April 14, 1865. Bringing this all full circle back to that idea we started with. If you don't give up, efforts don't go to waste. Those who try never lose. Lincoln's life is literally the ultimate proof of this principle. He was beaten down by poverty, by death, by clinical depression, and by political failure. But his positive, relentless mindset, his absolute refusal to stop trying, is what ultimately allowed him to change the world. So I want to leave you with this. Knowing what Abraham Lincoln overcame, knowing that he swam through freezing rivers and survived unimaginable grief just to learn and serve, how will you use your own setbacks to fuel your relentless journey forward? The next time you hit a wall, remember the man from the log cabin. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.